When Shaquille O'Neal walked down the jetway at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International on a Thursday morning in April, he was wearing a gray crewneck sweatshirt, dark joggers, and a pair of clean white sneakers with no visible branding. No jewelry, no security, one carry-on. A plain black duffel with no logo, except for a small gold pin on the zipper pull, a B, worn smooth, the size of a thumbnail, that he touched once before he lifted the bag off the conveyor. Gate B-17. Flight 1142 to Los Angeles. Departure 6:55 a.m. He had flown this route 47 times in the past 3 years. He was traveling in first class. Seat 2A. He handed his printed boarding pass to the gate agent, walked the jetway, turned left at the cabin door, and was already settled. Duffel stowed, phone face down on the armrest, when the senior flight attendant came forward. Her name badge read Patricia. There was a silver service stripe below it. She looked at him, at his sweatshirt, at his sneakers. Her eyes made the full trip and came back to his face and stayed there. "Sir," she said, "I think you may be in the wrong section." He looked at her. He said absolutely nothing. He had been at the gate for 40 minutes before boarding began, and he had noticed 4 things. The first was a blue folder Patricia had been briefing from when 2 junior flight attendants huddled with her at the podium before the door opened. He could not read it from his seat. He could see the corporate logo, North Ark Aviation Group, in the small, freshly rebranded font of a company that had recently decided what it wanted to be. The folder was thin, not a safety brief, something new from corporate. A policy update. He noted it. The second was Patricia's lanyard. When she scanned his boarding pass at the door, he saw the service stripe up close. 22 years. He noticed she scanned the pass and then scanned him, and he noticed the half-second between those 2 looks. The third was a phone, face up on the galley jump seat as he passed through the door. The screensaver was a young woman in pale blue scrubs, holding a sheet of paper mid-laugh, not yet looking at the camera. The kind of photo taken in the exact moment a person finds out something that changes everything. Patricia's daughter, maybe, her niece. Someone she looked at every morning before anything else. The fourth was the gold B on his own zipper pull. He touched it the way he always did. Filed everything. Found his seat. Now here is the part nobody on that aircraft understood. 4 months before that Thursday, in April, Shaquille O'Neal had entered quiet negotiations with the board of North Ark Aviation Group, the parent company of the airline whose plane he was sitting in the seat he had just been told he did not belong in. 17 weeks of private talks. A 22% equity acquisition. A board seat. The largest individual stake in North Ark's history. The final vote was scheduled for Friday morning at 9 o'clock, 18 hours away. What Patricia had absolutely no idea about, as she stood in that aisle waiting for him to gather his things, was that the man in the gray sweatshirt would own more of this airline than any single human being alive by the time she woke up the next morning. Stay with us for the full story. Because the ending has nothing to do with the airline, and that is exactly why it is going to reach you the way it does. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey, in a neighborhood where the phrase first class had nothing to do with airplanes. It described the rare people on your block who had worked out something the rest were still solving. How to move through a world that had not built its doors with you in mind, and move through it anyway, without explanation, without apology, without slowing down to let anyone's confusion become your own. His stepfather, Philip Harrison, was a United States Army sergeant, a precise, deliberate man, a man whose spine never bent, whose voice never climbed, who walked into rooms the way a wall walks into a room, not aggressively, just permanently. He moved the family across bases, Georgia, Germany, Texas. Shaq was always the new kid, always the biggest, always the one people looked at and made a determination about before he opened his mouth. Philip Harrison had one answer to that. Do not let another person's confusion about you become your confusion about you. You already know what you are. Act accordingly. But it was Odessa Crawford who gave him the language that made the lesson stick. Odessa was his maternal grandmother. She was born in Newark in 1929. She cleaned other people's spaces for 32 years, hotel rooms, corporate lobbies, and in the years before the terminals were renovated, the first-class lounges of the airport. She polished the brass fixtures and vacuumed the carpeting and wiped down the leather chairs of rooms she was not allowed to sit in. She did this work with the specific quality of attention that belongs to people who understand that what they are doing matters more than what anyone thinks of them doing it. She did not perform dignity. She simply had it, in every room, under every set of eyes. She wore one thing every day she worked: a small gold pin on the left breast pocket of her uniform. A B. She had bought it at a 5 and dime in 1952 for 40 cents. She wore it until the gold wore smooth and the wings lost their detail, and it became a shape more than a symbol. She told Shaq, the summer he was 11, what it meant. They were sitting on her front steps in August heat, and he had asked. The bee doesn't wait, she said. It doesn't stand at the door of the garden and ask if it belongs. It goes. It does the work it came to do. And it leaves something behind that wasn't there when it arrived. She looked at him. That is the only rule I have ever needed. And then she told him the thing that followed him into every room for the rest of his life. He had come home from school with a particular damage that boys do to each other, a thing said on the bus, a dismissal designed to fit exactly into the seam where a kid is still deciding who he is. Odessa had let him finish. She had not moved from her chair. Then she looked at him directly and said, "Every room you walk into, you belong there. Not because someone told you so. Because you already know. That is the difference. That has always been the difference." She died the summer before he went to El Sue. He was with her the last 3 weeks. The morning of her funeral, he took the gold bee pin from the breast pocket of her uniform, and he has carried it everywhere since. It is on the zipper pull of a plain black duffel bag. He touches it once before he goes anywhere. That was the thing Patricia Odom saw on the bag when she looked at him. The thing she had no name for. Shaq went to El Sue at 18. He averaged 27, 6 points per game his final season. First overall pick in the 1992 NBA draft. 4 championships. 3 finals MVPs. A net worth that crossed $400 million in his mid-30s. He built it all the way Odessa had told him to, without asking a room for permission to be in it. He also built a foundation. Among other things, it pays nursing scholarships for students who have had to defer their education to care for a sick parent. He named the program after the woman who cleaned first-class lounges for 32 years and was never offered a seat. The Odessa Fund. On the morning of the Thursday in April, it was actively supporting 214 students across 8 states. He was not thinking about any of this when he settled into seat 2A. He was thinking about the board vote in 18 hours. He was thinking about the blue corporate folder Patricia had been briefing from. He was thinking about the young woman in pale blue scrubs on the phone he had passed in the galley, mid-laugh, holding something she had just been told. Patricia Odom had grown up in Memphis, Tennessee, the oldest daughter of a woman named Rosie, who worked the early shift at a dry cleaning plant, and sang soprano in the choir at Greater New Bethel every Sunday of her adult life, without exception. Patricia had wanted to be a nurse for as long as she could identify the feeling of wanting something. She had the temperament for it before she had the training, the stillness under pressure, the ability to read a room's physical state before anyone said a word, the specific patience of someone who understands that what a person needs and what a person says they need are frequently not the same thing. She was accepted to the nursing program at Memphis Community College in 2001. Orientation was September 12th. On August 3rd, her mother was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. She deferred. She took the airline job because it had the best health coverage she could find without a degree, and because the schedule meant she could be home between trips. She told herself 1 year. Rosie stabilized. Patricia deferred again, and again. By 2009, when Rosie died after 8 years of illness and 2 hospitalizations, Patricia had been in the air for 8 years, had raised a daughter almost entirely alone, and had a pension she could not afford to abandon. She had gone to bed the night before the Thursday flight, staring at a water stain on her ceiling, doing the math the way people who grew up without money always do math, not in the mind, in the bones, automatically, even after the money improves, even when the number is technically fine. Maya's scholarship review was coming up. Patricia wasn't certain it would cover the next semester in full. She had been calculating the gap since 11 p.m. The North Arc corporate dress code memo had arrived 3 weeks before. New enforcement language for premium cabin sections. She had raised a question in the team briefing. Her supervisor had looked at her with the expression of someone who had already had this conversation with people above them and lost. Non-negotiable, Patricia. She had flown 6 legs since the memo. This was the 7th. She saw the large man in the gray sweatshirt in seat 2A. She had the folder. She had the supervisor's voice. She was running numbers about Maya's tuition. And she said it before she had finished deciding to. She knew, the moment his eyes met hers and simply stayed there, calm and completely without surprise, that she had said the wrong thing. By 6:49 a.m., the first-class cabin was nearly full. Seat 1A held a man in his 60s in a charcoal suit with the Wall Street Journal folded to the market section. Seat 1B held a woman with a laptop and the particular forward lean of someone on a deadline. Seat 2B, the seat beside Shaq, was empty. Shaq was in 2A. Patricia was in the aisle with her clipboard, and she said it again. Quieter this time, the way people repeat things they know are wrong when they can't locate the exit. Sir, I'm going to need you to move to your assigned section. This is my assigned section, he said. The same tone he would use to ask for water. She looked at the manifest. She looked at the seat number. She looked back at him. Something in her face that had been certain was no longer certain. Before it resolved, Derek Wynn appeared from the galley. 29. 6 months with the airline. His face had not yet learned how to be neutral, and what it was showing right now was available to anyone looking. He stood at the galley entrance and said nothing. He watched. In 3A, Margaret Holloway, 72, retired high school English teacher, Decatur, Georgia, a paperback with a heavily cracked spine open in her lap, had lowered the book the moment Patricia first spoke. She had not raised it again. She was watching through the gap in the headrests with the patience of a person who spent 40 years in a classroom, learning that the first 2 minutes of any situation tell you everything about what is actually happening. She did not speak. She turned a page she had not read. Patricia checked the manifest twice. Seat 2A. O'Neill. Her eyes moved from the page to the man to the gold pin on the duffel in the overhead bin, catching the cabin light. I apologize for the confusion, she said finally. The words had the particular weight of something that cannot be taken back. "Can I get you anything?" "Water," he said. "Thank you." She went to the galley. Derek was already there. He handed her the bottle before she reached for it. He looked at her once. He did not say anything. He did not need to. She brought the water to 2A and set it on the armrest tray without another word. In the next 12 minutes, she passed seat 1A 3 times and 1B twice. She did not return to 2A. The man in the charcoal suit put down his newspaper and looked across the aisle for a long moment. He went back to the markets page. Margaret Holloway turned another page she had not read. At 6:55 a.m., the door closed. Flight 1142 pushed back from gate B-17, exactly on time. The flight was 3 hours and 11 minutes. 40 minutes in, when the seatbelt sign turned off, a 13-year-old boy in row 7 stood up, walked forward toward the first-class curtain, and stopped. He stood very still for 3 full seconds. Then he walked back to row 7 and said something to the woman beside him, his mother, in a voice he did not fully lower. Both of them looked forward. He picked up his phone. He did not take a photo. He opened something on the screen, looked at the aisle, looked at the screen again, the way you look when you are checking something you almost cannot believe needs to be checked. Information moved through that cabin without anyone announcing it. Not a sound, just the particular change in the quality of a room when everyone has understood the same thing at slightly different moments. Derek Wynn came forward. He set a second bottle of water on the tray at 2A without being asked, leaned close to the headrest, and said in a voice that was for the seat and no one else, "I want you to know I don't agree with what happened earlier." "That's all, sir." He straightened. He walked back. Shaq looked at the second bottle. He did not turn around. In the galley, Patricia Odom had been holding a tray of orange juice cups for 90 seconds without moving. Something was traveling through her that was not yet understanding but lived close to it. The sensation of a room that has shifted its weight in a direction you were not ready for, that has shown you something you cannot press back to where it was. Her face did not change. 22 years. She knew how to keep her face still. Before you hear what he did next, the voice continues, you need to understand one thing. At 37,000 feet above Tennessee, Shaq took out his phone. He had 2 messages. He read them both. He sat for 4 full minutes without moving. Then he pressed call. And he said 4 words to the attorney on the other end of that line. 4 words that would determine what happened to that airline and to every person on it by the following morning. Stay with us. The vents pushed air the way they always do. Nobody in row 7 got up again. He said, "Let's close it today." That was the call. 14 seconds. He put the phone face down on his knee and asked Derek, passing with the drink cart, for a glass of water. "Yes, sir," Derek said. He brought it without delay. Shaq spent the remaining 2 hours reading. A thick document, tabbed and flagged, balance sheets, route projections, labor agreements. Near the back, his attorney had marked a section in yellow, restructuring provisions. What happened to long-term employees in a transition? He read that section twice. He wrote 1 note in the margin, Protect 22YR. He had written it in the shorthand he used with his team. His attorney would know what it meant by the time the sun went down. When the plane reached the gate and the cabin began to deplane, seat 2A was the last first-class passenger to stand. He reached up, retrieved the duffel, touched the gold B on the zipper pull. He took his time. Patricia was at the galley entrance when he came through, where flight attendants always stand at deplaning, the practiced goodbye. The door they hold open for the people they spent 3 hours in the air with. She met his eyes. She looked like a person who had spent 3 hours and 11 minutes in a room they could not exit, quietly rearranging what they believed to be true. He stopped. He did not tell her about the call. He did not tell her about the board vote, or the restructuring clause, or the 2 words he had written in a margin at 37,000 feet. He looked at her, at the 22-year stripe, at the face of someone who had spent the majority of her adult life taking care of strangers in the air, while the things she actually wanted to do with her life waited on the ground. And he said, "You've been doing this a long time. That matters." He walked off the plane. Margaret Holloway was 3 passengers behind him. As she reached the galley, she stopped. She was small. She looked up at Patricia slightly and said one sentence, exactly one, in exactly the tone of a teacher who has decided that this is the one moment in this particular story that requires a voice. That man knew exactly who he was in every moment on this flight. I hope you'll be able to say the same when you think about it tonight. She did not wait for a response. She smiled, not unkindly, the way a good teacher smiles when the lesson is the lesson and everything else is already handled. She deplaned. Patricia stood in the empty galley for 4 minutes after the last passenger was off. Then her phone lit up. A text from Maya. Maya Odom was 24 years old and in her 2nd year of the nursing program at Memphis Community College, the one her mother had been accepted to in 2001, and deferred and never went back to. She had enrolled at 22 after finding a scholarship online during a long search that had almost convinced her it was not possible. The application was through a foundation. She had qualified. The money had come through. She had been telling her mother for 14 months that she would not have gotten there without it. The foundation was called the Odessa Fund. Maya's text read, "Mom, are you on a flight right now? Did something happen? I'm seeing something." Patricia typed, "He was a passenger." "Mom." A pause. "That's Shaquille O'Neal." "Mom." "His foundation. The Odessa Fund. It's his. He started it after his grandmother died. She cleaned airport lounges. He named it after her." Patricia read it once. She read it again. She set the phone face down on the jump seat. She picked it back up. She read it a 3rd time. She did not know about the board vote. She did not know about the 22% stake, or the equity structure, or the call made over Tennessee, or the 2 words written in a margin. She would read the North Arc press release the next morning like everyone else, and she would sit with it for a long time. What she knew, standing in a galley with the jetway still attached and the cleaning crew not yet boarded, was this: for 14 months, the man she had told was in the wrong section had been funding her daughter's nursing education. He had named the program after a woman who spent 32 years cleaning the kind of rooms she was not allowed to sit in. And in that galley, every day, Patricia had been doing some version of the same thing, reading people at the door, deciding who belonged, and not always getting it right. She stood there until the cleaning crew knocked. Derek Wynn filed his post-flight report before he left the gate. He wrote a note about the incident. He did not know yet about the equity deal or the restructuring documents, or what 2 words had been written in a margin at cruising altitude. He found out the next morning, same as everyone else. What he did not find out until 6 weeks later, when his supervisor called him in to tell him he had been flagged for a new crew development mentorship track, a program that had not existed before that Thursday in April, was who had flagged him. He figured it out, eventually. Here is what each of them walked away carrying. Derek Wynn, 29 years old, 6 months in the air, not yet sure he was going to stay, learned that doing the right thing quietly in a galley, when the only person watching is yourself, is still doing the right thing. He is currently in a crew mentorship program. He did not know who put his name forward. He knows now. Margaret Holloway, retired schoolteacher, 40 years in a classroom, who said exactly one sentence to exactly one person in exactly the right moment, went home. She has not mentioned it to anyone. She said what needed to be said. That was sufficient. Patricia Odom, 54 years old, 22 years of service, the daughter of Rosie and the mother of Maya, received a letter last month about her pension protections in the North Ark restructuring. She read it 3 times. She knows who made sure the language was there. She has not said this publicly. She carries it differently than she carried things before. And Shaquille O'Neal, somewhere in an airport, every time, touches a worn gold bee on a zipper pull and walks into the room. He already knew. In seat 2A, at the door, in the 40 minutes at the gate, before anyone said a word, he already knew exactly who he was in that space. He did not need the room to confirm it. He did not need the board vote to confirm it. He did not need any of it. Odessa had told him when he was 11 years old, and he had never needed to be told again. He already knew. That was always the whole story. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where in the world you are watching from. And if you have ever had an Odessa, someone who handed you the words you have been living by ever since, leave their name below. They deserve to be said out loud. If this story reached you somewhere real, the like button is there. Not for the channel. For every person who ever cleaned a room they were not allowed to sit in and did the work anyway. Subscribe if you haven't. This community is built around one belief, that the quiet moves are always the most powerful ones, and the people who make them are usually the ones nobody was watching. There are more of these stories here. Next, he walked into the dealership in sweats. They told him he couldn't afford anything on the lot. He bought the building. That one is coming. We will see you there.